On a clear spring morning in the year 1980, two geologists fly high above a mountain that appears perfectly calm and serene. Below their small aircraft, Mount St. Helens rests in a deceptive silence beneath a flawless gleaming cap of springtime snow. Dorothy Stoffel and her husband gaze downward through the window, unaware that they are watching the final moments of an era. Then, in a single heartbeat, the entire north face of the great mountain begins to shift and ripple strangely beneath them. What they witness in those seconds, no human eye has ever recorded so closely, and they barely escape the sky to tell the tale. A tremendous force, long hidden far underground, is about to reshape a landscape that had stood unchanged for many centuries. This is the story of the morning when a mountain that locals had always called gentle revealed its true and ancient nature. How could a volcano studied for weeks by some of the finest experts in the world still catch an entire nation by surprise? What the official record so rarely emphasizes is the quiet tension between urgent scientific warning and stubborn public doubt. Behind the famous photographs lies a far deeper question about how societies choose to respond to a danger they cannot yet see. This is the account of how one unforgettable morning transformed the science of volcanoes, public policy, and the land itself. To understand that fateful morning, we must first travel into the lush green heart of the Pacific Northwest of the United States. Here, the Cascade Range rises in a long and majestic chain of peaks that stretches from northern California up into Canada. These towering mountains are not ordinary summits at all, for each one is a sleeping volcano resting upon the ring of fire. Mount St. Helens stands proudly among them as the youngest and most symmetrical of all, a near-perfect cone of dazzling ice. For generations, settlers, travelers, and artists admire its graceful, snow-clad slopes and call it the Fuji of America. At its forested base lies Spirit Lake, a brilliant mirror of clear blue water surrounded by ancient forests of towering fir. Lodges and quiet campgrounds dot its peaceful shores, and families arrive each summer to fish, to hike, and to rest a while. The mountain seems utterly eternal, a fixed and reassuring landmark in a region defined by rivers, timber, and endless open sky. Yet the local tribes preserve far older memories, telling of a peak that once burned and trembled with tremendous fury. Their ancient legends speak of a beautiful spirit and a fire mountain, forever locked in a great struggle across the long ages. Geologists know these old stories carry real truth, for the mountain had last stirred to life more than a full century earlier. By the year 1980, the surrounding region has grown comfortable, its volcanic past fading quietly into the routine of daily life. Logging crews work the wooded slopes, scientists study the layered rocks, and tourists photograph the famous mirror reflection. The volcano's near-perfect symmetry makes it a beloved subject for painters, photographers, and weekend travelers alike. Children grow up beneath its watchful peak, never once doubting that the White Mountain will stand above their homes forever. The surrounding forests shelter elk, deer, and black bears, and the clear, cold streams run with the meltwater of glaciers. Old timber roads wind through the green hills, carrying logging trucks past stands of fir grown for hundreds of years. Spirit Lake draws swimmers and boaters each summer, its calm surface reflecting the white peak like a flawless painting. To the people who live here, the volcano is simply a mountain, a quiet postcard backdrop to their everyday working lives. No one expects that this gentle and familiar giant is now quietly counting down the final months of its long, deep slumber. Few residents imagine that far beneath this peaceful surface, immense and patient pressures are slowly beginning to build again. In the middle of March in 1980, the very first signs appear deep below the surface where no human eye is able to reach them. Sensitive seismographs across the state of Washington begin to record a strange swarm of small but persistent earthquakes. At first, the gentle tremors are faint and easily mistaken for the ordinary settling of the restless mountains of the Cascades. But the scientists who carefully watch the instruments soon notice a clear pattern that simply cannot be explained away. The earthquakes grow steadily stronger and more frequent, clustering directly beneath the silent and snow-covered mountain. Within only a few days, the ground shudders dozens of times every hour, and the worried experts exchange uneasy glances. Something enormous is moving deep underground, forcing its way slowly upward through ancient and unyielding layers of rock. Geologists rush in from across the country, setting up monitoring stations and racing against time to understand the threat. They know the mountain has erupted before, yet no living person has ever witnessed such a vast, sleeping giant beginning to wake. The gathered data tells a clear and sobering story, for molten rock is rising steadily toward the very heart of the volcano. Teams from the United States Geological Survey establish a careful watch, plotting every single tremor on their growing charts. The pattern of the quakes tells the experts that magma is forcing open fresh pathways through the rock far beneath the peak. Local radio stations begin to report the unusual activity, and the name of the mountain spreads quickly across the nation. Each passing day brings new readings, and a quiet certainty grows that this great awakening will not simply fade away. Then, on the 27th day of March, the restless mountain finally answers the warnings with its first dramatic act. A sudden, powerful blast of steam tears open a dark crater at the summit, sending fine ash drifting across the pure white snow. This is what scientists call a phreatic eruption, driven by groundwater flashing to steam against the rising heat far below. It is only a warning and not the main event. Yet it announces clearly to the watching world that the volcano has awakened. Day after day, fresh bursts of steam and dark ash stain the bright snowfields and steadily widen the growing summit crater. News crews arrive from every corner of the country, and the once quiet mountain becomes a great national spectacle overnight. Remarkably, the obvious danger seems to draw the crowds closer rather than scattering them, as curiosity overwhelms caution. Tourists line the winding roads with their cameras, and small planes circle the smoking summit to capture the rising plumes. Local businesses sell printed shirts and souvenirs, and the eruption rapidly becomes an attraction far more than a true threat. The community splits sharply between those who fear the worst and those who treat the unrest as nothing but a passing show. Authorities establish restricted zones around the volcano, but the boundaries are debated, contested, and hard to enforce. Property owners loudly demand access to their beloved cabins, and economic pressure pushes hard against scientific caution. Among the determined residents is Harry Truman, an aging lodge keeper who flatly refuses to abandon his home beside the lake. He becomes a kind of folk hero, declaring that the mountain and he share a deep understanding, built over many long decades. His cheerful defiance captures the public imagination, even as the watching scientists quietly grow more and more alarmed. Helicopters ferry scientists to the rim, where they peer down into a crater that widens visibly with every passing week. The summit, once a single smooth dome of snow, is now scarred by twin craters that slowly merge into one dark opening. Photographers capture striking images that fill the newspapers, and the mountain becomes the most watched peak on Earth. The awakening dominates the evening news each night, and millions across the country watch the dark plumes climb the sky. Roadblocks appear on the highways leading toward the volcano, manned by officials trying to hold back the eager crowds. Yet for every car turned away, another finds a quiet back road, drawn by the irresistible pull of witnessing history. By the month of April, the experts detect something far more frightening than the swarms of quakes or the drifting clouds of ash. The entire north flank of the Great Mountain is now swelling outward, pushed by molten magma trapped just beneath the surface. This dramatic deformation, soon known to the world simply as the Bulge, grows at a truly astonishing rate of meters each week. Precise daily measurements reveal the swelling slope advancing nearly 2 full meters every single day toward the valley below. No volcano anywhere in the modern record has ever been seen to deform so quickly and so visibly before watching human eyes. The scientists understand the terrible implication at once, for the entire mountainside is becoming dangerously unstable. Among them is David Johnston, a young and brilliant volcanologist deeply devoted to studying these immense and violent forces. He warns plainly and repeatedly that the Bulge could fail without notice, unleashing an explosion of truly staggering power. Johnston famously compares standing anywhere near the volcano to standing beside a great barrel of dynamite with a lit fuse. His urgent message is clear and unwelcome, for it threatens to keep both tourists and property owners far from the mountain. He and his fellow scientists argue fiercely for caution, pleading with the officials to widen the dangerous restricted zone. Yet the mountain offers no obvious clue at all about when or even whether the long-feared catastrophe might finally arrive. Long, anxious weeks pass in tense uncertainty, with the Bulge expanding daily and the impatient public growing ever bolder. The scientists watch almost helplessly as the slope strains, knowing the next move belongs entirely to the volcano alone. Surveyors aim their instruments at reflectors fixed to the slope, measuring the relentless outward creep of the swelling earth. The numbers are almost beyond belief, for the north side of the mountain now extends far past its original ancient outline. Geologists understand that gravity alone could one day pull the oversteepened slope down in a single catastrophic moment. Johnston insists firmly that the observation posts be placed as far from the dangerous Bulge as the science will allow. Behind closed doors, the experts quietly debate the unthinkable, knowing that thousands of lives may rest on their judgment. By the middle of the month of May, a strange and deeply dangerous quiet begins to settle over the troubled mountain. The earthquakes gradually ease, the ash eruptions slowly fade, and the summit falls silent beneath the warm spring sun. To many casual observers, the lull strongly suggests that the long crisis is finally passing and the worst has been avoided. Pressure mounts steadily on the authorities to relax the restrictions and allow people back toward the forbidden slopes. Property owners are carefully escorted in to retrieve belongings, and frustration with the long closures continues to grow. Campers and curious sightseers gather hopefully at the edges of the zone, convinced that the great danger has finally faded. The weekend of the 17th of May arrives unusually warm and bright, drawing eager crowds into the surrounding hills. Many people now believe the mountain has merely grumbled and returned to sleep, its frightening threat fading into memory. But the scientists know the underlying truth has not changed, for the Bulge still strains against the slowly failing rock. Beneath the deceptively calm surface, the trapped magma continues to press relentlessly against its crumbling rocky cage. The mountain has not surrendered at all. It has only paused, silently gathering its strength for one decisive final moment. On the morning of the 18th, David Johnston keeps his lonely watch from an observation post some miles to the north. The Stoffels take to the open air in their small plane, hoping to study the steaming crater from a far safer high vantage. At precisely 32 minutes past 8, the entire world below them changes faster than any human mind can comprehend. Newspapers begin to wonder aloud whether the long-promised great eruption will ever truly come to pass at all. Some impatient residents slip past the barriers, eager to reclaim cabins and possessions left behind in the earlier rush. The scientists plead for continued patience, but their warnings grow harder to defend against the long, deceptive silence. Saturday evening settles peacefully over the green hills, and few who sleep nearby sense how little time now remains. A sudden, powerful earthquake strikes directly beneath the mountain, severing the last fragile threads holding the bulge. In a single shattering instant, the entire swollen north face breaks completely free and begins to slide toward the valley. It becomes the largest landslide ever witnessed in all of recorded history, a vast moving wall of shattered rock and ice. Whole cubic kilometers of rock and glacier rush downward at once, suddenly releasing the immense pressure sealed within. With the heavy mountainside abruptly gone, the molten magma is exposed, and the trapped energy escapes all at once. A devastating blast erupts sideways across the land rather than straight upward, racing outward at almost unthinkable speed. The powerful lateral wave flattens ancient forests for many miles, laying countless great trees down like fragile straw. In only moments, a vast green and living wilderness becomes a gray and silent plain, stripped bare of nearly all its life. David Johnston, watching closely from his exposed post, radios one final urgent message before the wave finally reaches him. His brief and unforgettable warning confirms to the distant team that the long-feared catastrophe has truly arrived at last. The blast overtakes the slopes faster than any speeding vehicle, leaving almost no chance for those nearby to escape it. There is no final warning, and no last tremor felt by those nearby, only the sudden and total release of pending forces. The shock wave races outward in a great expanding ring, overtaking nearly everything in its path within mere seconds. Superheated gas and pulverized rock surge across ridges and valleys alike, sparing little that stands within the zone. From the air, the Stoffels watch in stunned disbelief as the very mountain they came to study tears itself apart below. The towering avalanche of debris pours violently into Spirit Lake, displacing all of its waters in a single enormous surge. A colossal wave rises up from the lake and sweeps high up the slopes, tearing away the standing forest along its shoreline. When the churned waters finally settle, the once pristine lake lies choked with shattered timber and clouded thick with ash. High above the ruined mountain, a colossal column of ash and gas now climbs furiously upward into the bright morning sky. Within only minutes, it reaches a height of more than 15 kilometers, piercing the high clouds far above the broken peak. Day suddenly turns to deep night as the rapidly spreading plume blots out the sun across vast stretches of the wide region. Ash begins to fall like dark snow over distant towns and farms, slowly burying roads, fields, and rooftops in fine powder. Those fleeing the stricken area find themselves swallowed whole by total darkness beneath a steady rain of stone and grit. Street lights flicker on at midday as the heavy cloud drifts eastward across several states in the course of a single afternoon. Aircraft are grounded, busy highways close, and entire communities seem to vanish beneath the descending blanket of gray ash. The vast plume rides the high winds for hundreds of miles, slowly carrying the mountain's fine dust around the entire globe. Lightning crackles wildly within the rising ash cloud, born of the violent friction of countless particles colliding aloft. The eruption column spreads at its top into a vast anvil shape, casting the long shadow that stretches for many miles around. In nearby towns, residents sweep ash from their porches by the bucketful, uncertain whether the gray rain will ever stop. Car engines choke and stall on the dust-choked roads, stranding many travelers far from shelter beneath the darkened sky. Farmers watch helplessly as their fields disappear beneath the fine gray powder that smothers the tender young spring crops. As the great eruption rages on, the intense heat melts the mountain's remaining snow and ice in only a matter of minutes. The rushing meltwater mixes with ash and broken debris, forming thick, churning rivers of mud that scientists call Lahars. These powerful mud flows surge down the river valleys, gathering up huge boulders and whole trees in their relentless path. They move with terrible, unstoppable momentum, sweeping away bridges, roads, and cabins far from the mountain itself. The Turtle River swiftly becomes a roaring torrent of gray sludge, transforming a gentle green valley into utter chaos. Along its banks, a young couple named Venus Durgan and Roald Righton wake suddenly to a deep sound, like distant thunder. They are camping peacefully by the water when the wall of mud arrives, lifting their heavy vehicle as though it were a toy. In a single instant, the pair are swept into the churning flow, struggling desperately against the rising tide of debris. Roald somehow manages to pull himself up onto a pile of floating logs and reaches out desperately for his lost companion. Venus is dragged beneath the churning surface, pinned hard by the timber and the crushing weight of the fast-moving mud. With truly extraordinary effort, Roald frees her and drags her onto the shifting logs as the violent flood roars past them. Battered, freezing, and exhausted, the two young survivors cling together until rescuers finally lift them to safety. Their narrow escape becomes one of the most remarkable stories of human survival from that unforgettable spring morning. Across the wider region, many others are not nearly so fortunate, and the valleys fall silent beneath the settling mud. The Lahars travel for tens of miles, finally pouring vast quantities of sediment into the rivers near the distant coast. Ships far downstream find the river mouths suddenly clogged, and busy ports struggle to keep their waterways open. Rescue helicopters take to the sky as soon as conditions allow, searching the vast gray wasteland for any sign of life. Pilots describe a landscape transformed beyond all recognition, where familiar rivers and roads have simply ceased to be. Against all the odds, scattered survivors are found clinging to ridgetops and rooftops, lifted one by one to safety. By the time the great eruption finally subsides, the once familiar mountain has been utterly and permanently remade. Where a graceful snow-capped cone had stood for centuries, a vast horseshoe-shaped crater now gapes toward the open sky. The proud summit has lost nearly 400 meters of its former height, all of it erased in a single terrible morning. An area of nearly 600 square kilometers now lies buried, flattened, or scoured all the way down to bare rock. Millions of fallen trees lie stretched out in vast parallel rows, every one of them pointing away from the central blast. The shattered landscape now resembles another lifeless world, gray and barren, with steam still rising from the warm ash. The rivers run thick with heavy sediment, and the region's prized salmon runs are devastated for many years to come. The timber industry counts staggering losses as countless acres of valuable standing forest are wiped away in an instant. Roads, bridges, and homes are simply gone, and the rising cost of the disaster soon climbs into the billions of dollars. Geologists who reach the crater rim describe a scene of raw and steaming desolation that mere words can scarcely capture. What had taken nature countless centuries to slowly build was undone in a span of time measured only in hours and minutes. The blast zone is divided by scientists into distinct regions, each one telling a different story of the mountain's fury. Beyond the flattened forest lies a wider band where the trees still stand, scorched and lifeless, like a silent ghost army. Even the surrounding glaciers have entirely vanished, melted away in moments by the searing heat of the lateral explosion. In the difficult days that follow, the full human cost of the eruption slowly and very painfully becomes clear to all. 57 people lost their lives that quiet spring morning, among them scientists, loggers, and curious visitors. David Johnston, who had warned so clearly and so bravely of the danger, was among those who never returned to their homes. Truman, the stubborn old lodge keeper, vanished forever with his home beneath the great avalanche beside his lake. Each name upon the list represents a story cut short, and the grieving nation mourns a tragedy it had struggled to imagine. Yet from the cooling ashes of that single morning, an unexpected and lasting legacy of knowledge slowly begins to emerge. Scientists come to realize that the deadly lateral blast had been almost impossible to predict with the tools of the time. The disaster forever transforms volcanology, teaching the world how to read the silent warnings of restless mountains. New monitoring networks spread rapidly across the entire globe, built upon the hard lessons learned at this single peak. The bulge, the blast, and the great collapse become a defining example studied by every generation of scientists that follows. Memorials slowly rise to honor those who were lost, and their names become woven into the long history of the region. The survivors carry their difficult memories forward, sharing accounts that help others grasp the true scale of that day. Government agencies carefully revise their emergency plans, determined that future warnings will be heeded far more swiftly. The eruption proves that even a closely watched volcano can defy prediction, humbling the confidence of its own observers. In time, the story of the mountain becomes a lesson taught in classrooms, a lasting reminder of nature's vast raw power. A great new national monument is eventually established, preserving the blast zone as an open laboratory for living science. Today, life slowly returns to the once blasted zone as hardy plants, busy insects, and wild animals reclaim the gray land. Scientists marvel quietly at the deep resilience of nature, watching a once ruined wilderness heal across the long decades. The mountain itself remains restless and alive, still monitored closely by instruments that never once stop their patient watch. It reminds us all that the quiet peaks rising around us are living forces of nature, patient, yet never truly at rest. How many other silent sleeping giants stand quietly among us today, waiting for a morning the world simply cannot foresee. Researchers from around the world still travel to this place, studying how an ecosystem rebuilds itself from almost nothing. Explore with us the other powerful moments when the restless earth reshaped the world and humanity found a way to endure.